some additional work on funding priorities. Last time in March, we did some additional work on funding priorities in small groups. So this section, this April 14th section of the document captures that work. So you'll see we have a small list of outcomes. And you'll see two sections, one labeled housing access and navigation, and the other housing supportive services. And so each, while we know and struggle with the fact that these issues certainly aren't mutually exclusive, we wanted to at least come up with some meaningful categories to further the work. So you'll see the items or the issues listed under housing access and navigation, and the ones that seem to fall best under housing supportive services. And we're going to do some more work on these today in groups. Before we proceed with that though, I do want to assure folks that the work that has been done on CoC structural issues and structural priorities has not, disappeared. The work is still important and the results are still important. In fact, I believe that work and those recommendations regarding how the work gets done, CoC structural issues, will be important as we determine how to implement service funding priorities. So as we make decisions about service funding priorities. Raphael, anything you would add?
No, I think you pretty much captured it. I think this is kind of, we're getting to a point now where we really want to create something fairly solid when it comes to like these specific priorities that we've been looking at for a while. I think we all have in our heads, like, we kind of know what we need to do, right? But, putting this down on paper and putting some structure behind it, I think it'll be helpful for us, especially as we move forward in the next couple of months, as we start planning for some funding opportunities. As you all know, and I mentioned this in every meeting, how important the home ARP funds are going to play in the role that in the decisions that we make in the next couple of months. That'll have I think, a significant impact in the next, 3 to 5 years. There's just a lot of, I think, moving parts that are going on within our system. And I think we're all doing something or involved in some type of committee or planning around different topics relating to the things we'll talk about today. But I think it'll help us at least take some time to look at how do we kind of organize that, and how do we put this all together in a package that we could, as we move forward, hold ourselves accountable around what needs to be done. So I think hopefully this is the first step to that. And, I think the goal is also to be fairly aggressive and look at having something fairly solid by the end of next month, so that we can kind of get into the summer months and we start planning for the home ARP fund, that we have something fairly solid to share with HUD, because we have to submit that report directly to HUD and how we're going to utilize those HUD home ARP funds. So I'll kind of leave it at that. We'll have more discussions in our smaller groups. Shelley and I will facilitate each one of the groups, and I think we're going to, what's the next step now? Shelley, we're going to split the group up?
Yes, just to give you a heads up of where we're going. We'll have two groups. We'll allow Zoom to split this larger group into two groups. Our goal here is, as you know, consistent with what Raphael just said, we want to get to the point where we're making decisions about how these priorities will be addressed, and especially through funding, but also through partnerships, advocacy, or other methods. Here are the questions that we'll be focusing on. We want to take a look at what's already happening. Raphael mentioned this a moment ago. There are already activities going on to look at some of these issues. So let's all get on the same page about what's already happening, what role we think the CoC can play or continue to play. What in this, I like to think of these as sort of priority areas. What in this priority area should be done first? And what are the next best steps? And finally, who should be involved? I would encourage folks, if they're interested in, during especially the month of May, joining several meetings to work further on these issues, I would encourage folks to do so. Any questions? So those are the questions that we'll be looking at in our small groups, and then we'll come back together after about 35 to 45 minutes. We'll come back together and compare notes and talk about next steps.
I'm sorry, Shelley, can you repeat again the work in May? I don't understand the context there.
Yes, thanks, Tim. Today, we're kicking off the work on these two issues, but we want to move decisions around these two issues. We want to move that along pretty quickly. So we'd like to, for each of these areas, have several meetings focusing on fleshing out these areas in May. So we're looking at several groups. One will look at the priority area, housing, access, and navigation issues. And then we'll also be looking at housing supportive services. So we'll be asking for people to work on one of those areas. We know there's a lot in each area, and we get to identify what we think needs to be worked on first and get as far as we possibly can in May. Did that help? Thanks, Tim. Okay, so we stop the share. We'll move into small groups.